Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 12th of December 2024. Going to start by reminding you, we've just started a new fundraising campaign, Trucks Under the Christmas Tree. A whole bunch of different YouTubers coming together to raise 150,000 euros to get a whole bunch of trucks over to Ukraine so they can work on them and then make them shipshape and ready for whatever it is that those trucks are needed for. Different channels are raising for different trucks. Ours is going to be a kind of mini HIMARS one with some MLRS on fixings on the back there. And if you donate enough, you get a nice little pin, which would be fantastic. Already, we've only been doing this a couple of hours, and you guys have just been fantastic. There's a donor wall at the bottom of the page that will be on the bottom of the the main screen, and you can check that out from the link in the description. We are now, if you look at the main Trucks Under the Christmas Tree campaign page, we are into third place, and we've only been doing it a few hours. These guys have been going for much longer, so that's fantastic. Long may that continue, guys. Really appreciate your support. You guys are the best. Right, let's go on to military aid, and we're going to start with what I spent time talking about in a breaking news update this morning. This is exceptionally bad news. So Trump is on the front of the Time magazine as Person of the Year for all the various reasons that he is, and inside there is an interview with him that unfortunately illustrates his real views concerning Ukraine. And part of what he said is that he's vehemently opposed to strikes, US missile strikes deep into Russia. As you can see from this Yahoo News article about that time piece, Trump opposes Ukraine launching US missiles deep inside Russia. I'll just read you the main parts again. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? We're just escalating this war, making it worse. Okay, first thing to say, like, he's demonstrably wrong, right? What was the escalation that took place after that? An Oreshnik missile into Dnipropetrovsk. That, okay, whoop-de-doo, whatever. No escalation, to the point where actually people are rightfully pointing out that we've already crossed this line. Dylan Burns here, we've already crossed this line. Nothing came of it. What purpose does it serve to undercut strike permissions now? The only purpose for this man is to support Russia. Or he's just incredibly ignorant of what's going on. That red line has been crossed. Don't uncross it. It would be absolutely disastrous. That we know, I mean, I put this on Twitter myself, we know that there's been a big drop in guided glide bombs precisely because Ukraine has been able to use ATACMS to strike deeper into Russia, which has meant that they have taken their fighter bombers and moved them back so that they have fewer sorties because it's a longer distance, and so they are dropping fewer and fewer guided glide bombs. It's dropped off a cliff, right, the usage. That has saved lives. Yet he's talking about in this Time article that, oh, all these dead people, this escalation. No, it has saved lives. Those restrictions being lifted have saved lives. If you were critical of Jake Sullivan, you should be critical of Donald Trump here. It's exactly the same thought process. It is that these strikes are escalatory. But empirically, they are not. They have not been. So someone like America's First Patriot on my YouTube channel commenting, I don't know America's First Patriot. You've been a supporter of the channel and you started off being very supportive of Ukraine. You were going down more and more of Russia appeasement. And I wonder if you're just trying to get on side and then the truth comes out. Man, I love Trump, he says. Any policy decision from launching missiles into Russia to whether or not to support the Georgia Dream Party should be based on whether or not such policies and actions help America and put America first. Well, of course they do. If Russia prevails, America is a zero-sum game. This is global hegemony, of which America is at the top of the ladder. Any giving of power to Russia, any letting the foot off the neck of the Russian economy is to allow Russia to come back stronger and stronger than they are presently, and that will in turn hurt the US. This is a struggle of ideologies, but it's a struggle of global powers. And although the US is not perfect, I'd much rather the US is at the top of the global power structure than Russia and BRICS. It's that obvious. So he says the whole situation really does show that Trump is in no way appeasing Putin, or that Republicans are in Russia's pocket, as JP laughably claims, since Sullivan is a Democrat. So he's saying because he's anti-escalatory, he's in the same bucket as Sullivan, and therefore can't be in the pocket of the Americans. Just something to say to that. Phillips O'Brien has something to say to that point, which is, and Trump is even more worried about escalation than Biden. All those Trump supporters who mocked Biden for being worried, your guy's even more under Russian reflexive control. So go and look up the idea of reflexive control. And this is exactly what Trump is under there. But I think you'll find the underlying foundation for each person, Jake Sullivan and Donald Trump, is entirely different. Donald Trump is talking about anti-escalation, but really is a big fan of strongmen and dictators, and is not a fan of Ukraine, and doesn't like Zelensky for all sorts of reasons, such as Hunter Biden and Burisma and dirt on the Bidens, etc., and that being refused. Trump is coming from a completely different direction, but saying, "Oh, this is anti-escalatory," even though that escalation calculus has already been and gone. So it just doesn't make any sense. And Jake Sullivan is coming at it from a genuinely afraid of nukes, which Trump can be as well as having all of those other ideas in his head too. So this is just a poorly thought through comment. I'm sorry, America's First Patriot, but it is. The intelligence and military communities have made this assessment. What assessment? That's who JP and folks are mad at, disagree with, not Trump or Sullivan, fundamentally. I disagree with Sullivan, and I have done for a very long time, and I disagree with Trump for a whole myriad of reasons. And he is not good for Ukraine. This is a real problem. So anyway, that's just a few more sources to look into on this. Yeah. So actually, let's take the whole quote here. This could be good to do. So the question people want to know is, would you abandon Ukraine? It makes it so bad. And I had a meeting recently with a group of people from the government where they come in and brief me, and I'm not speaking out of turn. The numbers of dead soldiers that have been killed in the last months are numbers that are staggering, both Russians and Ukrainians, and the amounts are fairly equal. You know, I know they like to say they weren't, but they're fairly equal. So that's interesting. But the numbers of dead young soldiers lying on fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place. It's crazy. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? Just ask one of those experts why you're doing that. Just ask me. Come and ask me. I'll tell you why Ukraine is doing that, and I'll tell you why the US is doing that. We're just escalating this war and making it worse. No, you haven't. You've actually made it better, guided glide bombs being a point in case. That should not have been allowed to be done. Yes, it should. You are wrong. Now they're doing not only missiles, but they're doing other types of weapons. Well, they were doing that anyway. What are you talking about? And I think that's a very big mistake. But the number of people dying is number one, not sustainable. And I'm talking on both sides. It's really an advantage to both sides to get this thing done. So he's just as worried about the Russians losing lives, right? I guess in an abstract sense, we should be worried about the loss of human lives. But that's like, oh, I'm really worried about Hitler's loss of the SS. Oh, I'm really worried about. So, like, honestly, I'm going to be fairly frank with you now. I'm not going to hold back on Trump, because I think he's deeply ignorant, and is dangerous for Ukraine, and is dangerous for global security. And if people like this want to maintain their support for Trump no matter what, then they're just a part of a cult. Like, and you can say, well, you're the same. You're just against Trump no matter what. No, I will give him credit where credit is due. I have given Mitch McConnell credit where credit is due. I've given Lindsey Graham credit where credit is due. I've said very positive things about all the Republicans who've come out and done the right thing for Ukraine. And those are people I've never previously supported. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, not a fan of either of those people. So it doesn't work the other way. credit where credit's due. Trump will get credit where credit is due. And if he does the right thing, then that will be good, although I think he'll do it accidentally. But his entire rhetoric at the moment is dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Now, the view from Kiev, and this is connected. Unless Ukraine has the long-range weapons to strike back at Russia, Putin will have very little incentive to end his invasion. So if Trump is asking, well, why are we giving those missiles? If you take those missiles away from Ukraine and not allow them to use ATACMS deep into Russia, then that will incentivize Putin to keep going at the war for longer. There's less incentive to finish it because there will be... I mean, you're just making... you're making Ukraine fight with one hand tied behind its back again. It's just insane. Now, the US overnight has passed a massive $900 billion defense budget in the House, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Anyway, the budget for the DoD and defense, it has gone up again, as you would expect. It will now be considered by the senators, so it hasn't got through yet. The problem is, in my opinion, Lend-Lease has been taken out of it again. It's been excluded. Only a couple of minor things in support of Ukraine have been included. So the US passed the 2025 NDAA with key Ukraine provisions, banning recognition of Russian sovereignty over occupied regions, exploring AI weaponry collaboration, and reporting on Russia's terrorism funding. Lend-Lease was excluded. That can be read as what's written into the NDAA is the US exploiting Ukraine for its AI weaponry. That's how some people are reading that. Anyway, moving on. NATO is finally having a concrete conversation about aiming for 3% of GDP on defence. Edward Hunter Christie said, I've been advocating this for quite some time, and invariably I encountered reflexive objections that had very little substance. But it's always, I stress always, been clear that such a target is feasible. Do not believe anyone who claims it's not. It's not a trivial shift in public spending, to be sure, but with total public spending at 40 to 55% of GDP across Europe, it's important to have the right perspective. Shifting from 2% to 3% means shifting 1 percentage point of GDP, which in turn means shifting approximately 2% of total spending. If states raise the total tax burden of 1% percentage point by 0.5% of GDP and compress existing spending by 1% by 0.5% of GDP, the job is done. States drag their feet and come up with all sorts of narratives, primarily due to internalized mental attitudes towards the political process. There is a sense that budgets are extremely inflexible from a political perspective. Populations are amenable to change if provided with clear political leadership and messaging. Our citizens do not want to be insecure if they are told that we must mobilize in order to secure peace or to survive war if it comes. A 1% of GDP shift in the budget will be easily accepted. I'm not sure that, I mean, he's being very positive there. That I was listening to the radio just now, and in the UK, very like the US, we have a big issue with housing. And the UK government has just come out today, Labour government, and again, yeah, am I being pro-Labour? Labour government seem to have come in and said, right, we're actually going to get on and do some crap here. We are going to do some stuff. Not crap, we're actually going to get stuff done. Some of it's been unpopular, but while they've got massive mandate, you do your unpopular things first. One of them is popular in a sense of, like, everyone recognises we need houses built, but no one wants them built in their backyard. And so they've said they've literally almost 4 to 5 times increased the housing targets. And those targets have not been met for like 20 years. Successive governments have failed to do it. They've blown it out the water and say, like, we're going to do this. We're going to change planning. We're going to do this. We're going to have an infrastructure bill that comes out next year that will look at how do we get GP surgeries and the shops in when we're building these big blah, blah, blah. The point is that they're getting ready to do that. Now, why am I telling you this now? Because each government has their own domestic agenda and issues. And the UK government has issues with, right, we need to fund NHS waiting lists coming down. We need to fund building 1.5 million houses a year. Like, that's an insanely massive increase in housing. And that's going to take a lot of money as well. Although, you know, a lot of that's going to be done by, by private concerns and whatnot, developers. but essentially, every government has their own domestic issues that they need to spend an awful lot of money on. And I think it will be a challenge to move from 2% to 3%, especially when, since 2% has been going since 2014, and there's still countries that haven't reached 2%. So I think that will be a huge challenge. But I think it needs to be at 3%, given what is going on around the world, and given, you got China just behind Russia like an ominous shadow, waiting in the wings. Right, Ukraine is open to discussing the stationing of foreign troops on its territory, says Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Olha Stefanishnya. Ukraine is ready to speak about whatever works. Thank you very much, Sarah, with young baby as well. Yay! Oh, and a cup of tea. You can't complain. Ukraine is ready to speak about whatever works, she responded. So that's fantastic. This is now gathering momentum. In fact, Emmanuel Macron is in Poland. I know he's just met Sikorski at the airport. Foreign Minister Sikorski going to meet Donald Tusk about stationing European troops. And it might not be like European in a big kind of understanding of EU, or even, organized through those kind of mechanisms, but like bilateral, trilateral, whatever, like a group of maybe 5 countries providing that assistance to Ukraine. And that acts like a sort of NATO Article 5 contingency. Right, German aid to Ukraine says the 70 million euros pledged in September for the improvement of Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been increased to a total of 90 million euros. This has just been announced by the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Minister Svenja Schulze arrived in Ukraine today for a surprise visit and will hand over part of the promised humanitarian assistance. This includes 80 mobile combined heat and power plants, over 20 mobile boiler houses, transformers and hybrid generators, as well as lifting platforms for repairing central power lines. Really good news. All of this stuff that happens behind the scenes when you see these strikes taking place and the energy grid going down, like the work that goes on is relentless and incredible. And these guys are also heroes of Ukraine, getting the power back up and working so hard to make sure that Ukraine still functions as a country. So thanks to this assistance, the heat and electricity supply for a total of 2.6 million Ukrainians during the winter will be secured, says German aid to Ukraine. This is incredibly important support here from the Germans there. Excellent stuff. Colby Badwa, haven't heard from him for a long time, says the Army, the US Army, continues to obligate their replacement funding appropriated by the Ukrainian supplementals to upgrade old M2 Bradleys to the newest M2A4E1 variant. A new $656 million contract has been awarded to BAE Systems Land. That is the people who make the Bradleys. Bradley is produced in York, Pennsylvania. Now, this is money going into the US from the Ukrainian kind of supplementals, essentially. And this is what people often fail to understand, is that what you are getting for support to Ukraine is an upgrade of the American armed forces and the equipment that they use. Give older stuff to Ukraine and upgrade or get newer stuff in for the US. Okay, Ukraine's new Hitchhiker multi-purpose drone interceptor, says Bricktop NATO, has proved its worth on the Ukrainian front line, where it was successfully tested in battle. Capable of reaching speeds of 270 miles an hour and with a range of 125 miles, the electric-powered drone has been described as a game changer in the rapidly evolving conflict between Kyiv and Moscow. Fascinating, and good luck to this project. So, a British Hitchhiker multi-purpose drone interceptor. If they can use these to take down Shaheds, to take down Orlans and Zalas and Supercams, then that's fantastic. British seem to be involved in quite a lot of things going on. I've noticed over the past month, actually, you hear the laser Dragonfire, but also, mounting that on moving vehicles now, and these drones and other drones that we're hearing about, and then making barrels and doing X, Y, and Z and the maritime stuff. I'm pretty pleased with the Brits, all told, throughout the course of this war. Obviously, there's always more to do, and we could do more. But when the cupboards are fairly bare as a result of successive governments underfunding the armed forces, then well, although we do fund, well, there's a lot of money spent on the armed forces, but like I talked recently to you, a lot of the British money, a lot of our budget goes towards nuclear submarines that it didn't used to. That used to be in a different budget. It got moved to the defence budget. Weirdly, like it was under something like the Foreign Office or something like that, our nuclear deterrence. So that then got moved into the defence budget, which means that a vast majority of the defence budget is spent on nuclear submarines and nuclear missiles and pensions. And actually, although we spend one of the most in the world on defence, you know, you take those two things out, and it's not nearly as much as you would like to see. Erland here from Turchny says, Frit Ukraine for Ukraine and Come Back Alive secure a 1.6 million euro donation, including vital Interceptor drones. So we just talked about Hitchhiker drone. So this is coming from, well, half the funds is donated by the Norwegian company Gruppen, but essentially these are this is charity. Incredible, 1.6 million euros for Interceptor drones coming from charity. It's just fantastic. I mean, I've said this many times before, but when you look at the charitable donations to Ukraine compared to those to Russia, you can understand that really morality is on the side of Ukraine here. It's self-evidently true. Like if Russia really were the good guys, you would have loads of countries coming to Russia's aid here. Russia are the invading oppressors. Everyone understands it. Most people understand this. Some people don't. And then some people kind of do, but are massive isolationists and just want the US to retreat into a little bubble and stay safe over there, not interactive with the world and not cause threat to a growing Russian hegemonic onslaught. And talking about the place of charities, Return Alive charity has modernized the OSA systems for the AFU, according to Militiani. This is incredible. So the complexes can now operate the standard 9M33M3 surface-to-air missiles and the R-73. So the R-73, is that not the missile that... No, it wasn't. It was was it the R-73 that the Canadians gave? Let's have a look. Infrared heat homing missile. No, it might not be. This is short range air to air missile. Began work in 1973. Is used by lots of MiGs and Sukhois. Okay, no, it's not. It's not that missile. It's a different one. Oh, the R-70. Yes. So this is. Yeah, that's a Soviet one. Okay, so yeah, because the OSA, of course, is a Soviet piece of kit anyway. So let's go back to that. Yeah, was it not the R-80? Was I thinking about something like that? The Canadian missiles that they sent a load of unguided missiles to Ukraine. Anyway, the complexes can now operate the standard 9 M33M3 surface-to-air missiles and the R-73 air-to-air guided missiles. Air defense systems will be able to shoot down drones, helicopters, airplanes, and missiles more effectively. So this is a kind of Frank and Sam situation where they've adapted a bit like they've done to the Book system to be able to fire the RIM Sea Sparrow missiles that were traditionally fired from, say, NATO ships at aircraft. The Book systems can do that. Now the OSA system can fire these other missiles as well. So that's great. It gives a greater versatility to these platforms. The Ukrainian General Staff has aimed to boost voluntary military recruitment, reporting over 4,000 monthly sign-ups and 6,000 recruits from prison ranks as of December. Yet it's still insufficient for frontline needs. The GSUA also denies mobilisation from the age of 18. So you've got lots of things going on with mobilisation at the moment. Yes, they appear to have picked up mobilisation, but it's not nearly enough, which is why we're always complaining about boots on the ground. Deputy Minister for Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Ola Stefanishnya, who we've already heard from, said lowering the age of conscripts in Ukraine is impossible due to the lack of planning, training and equipping systems for brigades. The government stresses the need to fully equip existing units. I think that's a bit of a BS excuse, right? we don't have the planning and training and equipping system for brigades. What, for people like moving someone from the age of moving the age from 25 down to 23? We can't do that for those reasons. That's BS. That's BS. They need to fully equip existing units. Yep, that can be an issue. Like, there's no point getting new people in when we can't equip the guys that we've already recruited and trained. If that's an issue, then obviously that needs to be sorted out. I think the real issue is a political one and an economic one and a demographic one. So just to remind you, as American in Ukraine says, this should clear up why Ukraine hasn't drafted 18 to 24-year-olds, nor do they intend to. So the Americans might be arguing that they need to do that, but when this is the absolute chasm in that age group, and I don't know why, I presume it's because many have left the country. To clear more things up to date, 276,000 Ukrainians have died and only 87,000 Ukrainian children have been born this year. So this is just general mortality and whatnot. So they're not replacing the population. It is a population crisis for Ukraine. In fact, I think it's the worst in the world, Ukraine, in terms of death versus birth rates. Ukrainian families do receive monetary assistance per child from the state, but it's not much. The average income here in Lviv is around $600 a month, and inflation is rising. The old Soviet apartment blocks in some of the old Austrian-style buildings have cheap apartments, but the newer buildings and the houses are very expensive. There are many factors here preventing the birth rate from rising. Please note that 276 deaths I quoted are civilian deaths from all causes, not military. So you're going to have your, getting old, all the usual ways you have of dying. But then you're going to add military deaths to that and civilian deaths from war. Then you're going to pit that against the birth rates. And then you're going to understand that the birth rates are going to be far less because people are at war. People are not having babies. Either their partners are at war, so they physically can't make babies, right? Either one or the other is on the front line, or sometimes both in different places. Or they don't feel secure enough to have babies, or they are not in a financially secure enough position, like both safety from kind of existential sense, but also monetary, economic sense. There are lots of reasons why Ukraine is screwed at the moment in terms of demographics. And then that's what's going on down here. So there's not a replacement population. Look at that. This is an absolute catastrophe because these people in the future are going to have to support these people when they retire, right? So when you've got an inverted pyramid. This is the Peter Zion always talks about this, and China's going to go through this. The Western world is actually going to go through this just demographically anyway. This is a challenge. We are having, as we live longer and longer, that is not only a draw on our health systems and the welfare systems, but we have fewer people paying tax into paying for that burgeoning welfare system to look after the people at the top. So it's like an inverted pyramid or inverted triangle. Well, it's a triangle. There's no way up a triangle. It has to be. You get the point. This is a problem when you kind of think philosophically all the time. You question everything you say. So that is an issue, and it's particularly bad for Ukraine. In fact, it's the worst in the world for Ukraine in terms of what's going on down here. But what's going on here is all you need to know about why they are not recruiting in those age groups. Right. Zelensky has visited the first underground advanced surgical group in Ukraine. He's visited a HIMARS team as well, I think. This hospital has saved over 1,000 lives. Here, doctors receive wounded soldiers directly from the battlefield and provide them with medical care. It's all underground. Fantastic provision there. And we've seen like the Netherlands and other countries provide loads of really great medical equipment and mobile hospitals to Ukraine. Been absolutely fantastic. This is a Swedish Panzerbandvagn, the PVV 302, somewhere in Kursk. It's been given slat armor and a familiar collapsible drone net. So just for my Swedish viewers out there, and some of you who have actually served in these, here's your PBV 302 and look, covered in snow as well. It's like being at home in Sweden. Fir trees and snow. Actually, those aren't fir trees. They are deciduous trees, and they've lost their leaves. So what do I know? But you get the point. That is a PVV 302 Ukraine style. Check it out. Right, now on to some Russian things. So Russia cannot complete a series of new frigates without Ukrainian engines. So apparently they can't put the engines in these frigates, and instead of trying to work out how to build them, they've been forced to sell them to India. That's absolutely incredible, that news. I'm sure more details of that come out soon, but it just shows what desperate straits the the Russians are in with all sorts of manufacturing. And actually, I normally wouldn't have this in military aid, but just to put it together with the frigates there, Russia's plans to build passenger airliners are on the verge of failure, according to the BBC. After a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia planned to build 108 passenger airplanes, but they made only 7. 7 out of 108. Superjets 100s built from pre-war modifications, and we've seen a number of those catch fire, have issues with landing, issues with taking off. One in Turkey recently, one somewhere else as well, pretty much one after the other on consecutive days, I think. Also, during the almost 3 years of war, Russia was able to produce one research model each of the Il-96-400M and the Il-114, which are only used for testing. At the same time, many remote regions of Russia are completely dependent on aviation, so regional airplanes for local lines have become the most problematic part of Russian civil aviation. Russia is trying to replace foreign engines in superjets and MS-21s and put outdated Il-96-300 and Tu-214 airliners back into production. Resources that could have been spent on building civil aviation are being spent in particular on the production and the repair of combat aircraft. So there you go. I thought that was worth mentioning here. And then finally, as I said this morning, information has appeared online that the top engineer behind the modernization of the X-69 missiles and the development of new drones was allegedly killed in Moscow. Russian Telegram channels report that Mikhail Shatsky, deputy designer general at Mars Experimental Design Office, was shot dead. While the information has not yet been confirmed, although there is a picture of a dead body, on December the 10th, there were reports of a shooting in the suburbs of Moscow that left one middle-aged person dead. Videos of an ambulance arriving on the scene were posted online. So that could hinder Russia's ability to continue, certainly designing and thus producing upgraded missiles and whatnot. So there you go. Anyway, I really do appreciate your support. Thank you once again. And it's amazing what you guys are doing in terms of helping to fundraise already. I'm going to hopefully speak to Jonathan Fink from Silicon Curtain and possibly also your man. Oh, we're up to 2,000 already. Wow. So we're already 20% there, and it's only been out a few hours. Jonathan Fink and maybe Rick the Ukrainian. We are now into second place. We're just overtaken already. So that's absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for your assistance. Please check out the link in the description below. Anyway, thank you. And please like, subscribe, and share. Please, if you haven't subscribed already, I'm trying to get to 50,139 by the 2nd of January. Don't ask why. There is no particular reason, just for shits and giggles. But please click on my face up there and you'll be able to subscribe if you haven't already. It's no cost to yourself, but it just makes random numbers go up, which is good sometimes. Take care. Speak soon.